One of the most powerful statements I've ever heard about writing came from Neil Gaiman, where he was talking about what a unique writer Terry Pratchett was, because he said that Terry Pratchett was one of the few individuals he'd ever known who actually likes writing rather than just being a writer. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, probably more truth than most writers want to admit. Certainly, there's more than I want to admit. I like to imagine that my writing is important, that when I write to inspire. I look back at my writing and I don't just see words on the page. I see an audacious act of pure creation, where I, through my purity of willpower, have caused worlds and people to have come into existence. I've created something from nothing. I feel powerful. I feel creative. I feel accomplished. And that's where a lot of the problem is. It's really easy to focus on writing as something that we've done in the past or an identity that we're trying to project instead of an activity that we engage in on a regular basis. There's certainly times when I'm not feeling the writing, I don't really enjoy it, but I still like calling myself a writer, and I look at my projects in flight, and I feel like I'm a writer, even though I'm not doing as much writing as I should. And during these times, it's hard to keep up my discipline and make sure that I'm continuing to write instead of just thinking about writing or talking about writing or furiously posting about what I think about writing on Reddit. And those are really bad habits of mine because they make me feel like I'm doing writerly things when what I really need to do is just write something. Now, if you don't have any of those problems, then I really envy you. I'm not really sure why you're watching this video because apparently you love your writing process, and if anything, you should just go write something. But for everybody else, I've got three tips that you can use to try to keep the writing process fun. First, keep a guilty pleasure project. Right? This can take a lot of forms. I read on Reddit that a lot of people secretly write fanfic, and if that's your guilty pleasure, then that's great. It can feel like this isn't a lot of like really valuable writing because it doesn't have as much chance for publication. But the brutally honest truth is that if we only wrote things that we were sure we could publish, we wouldn't write very much. I've written dozens of short stories over the years, and I've only published a few. If we only ever write for publication, it really limits what you're going to write, and that can really drain the fun out of things, especially because it can be hard to predict what can publish, and sometimes, what we're pretty sure is going to publish is only going to be a pretty narrow range of things. So sometimes if you're really, really just laser focused on that, I absolutely have to publish, you can be writing in such a narrow range that it can become really stale and really old, and it's just not a good headspace to be in while you're writing if you're not having fun. The truth is, writing for a franchise that you'll never get a chance to get the copyright to can still be a lot of fun. And insofar as it is fun, it can be really worthwhile. I don't write fanfic per se, but I do write projects that are massively impractical. So, for example, one of my guilty pleasure projects, one that I worked on a lot last year, was a screenplay. It was a romantic comedy that involved some really specific humor, but it only works with very specific casting. So, if Anna Kendrick and Ryan Reynolds and Sam Rockwell are all up for doing a romantic comedy about local elections, and I can do some in jokes about different parts that they've played in the past, then that's going to be some really really funny metatextual comedy. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. And without that, the script is just a romantic comedy, and a lot of the parts in it don't really make sense. So realistically, my chances of selling that script are basically zero. But I just like working on it. It's fun, and that's all it has to be. When I'm not really feeling the writing and I'm not feeling like, one of my other projects is making the kind of progress that I want it to be making and I'm getting frustrated, I just go to my guilty pleasure project and I just work on it. And I don't really make any apologies for that. I just write and it's fun, and I think that's cool. I think there's something really valuable just in that writing something that feels fun. Second tip for keeping the process fun is to trade your writing with a buddy. right? Writing can be a really solitary activity. Writing a short story might take days, weeks. I mean, it could take months. Novels take months, novels take years. There have been times in my life where I haven't had a writing group, and I went literally years without showing my writing to anybody except for an editor. And pretty much all they would do is send me an acceptance or a rejection letter. It can feel like screaming into the void. It can feel like just chucking pages of writing straight into the fireplace. Having a writing group definitely changes that feeling. You get some feedback and you get to feel like somebody out there gives a crap about your writing, and that just feels good, right? The most common advice that I get about writing, including from people who don't actually identify as writers, is that you have to write for you because you just have to enjoy the purity of the experience. And on one hand, I mean, yeah, sure, like that's what the video is all about. Enjoy the process. So I get it. But on the other hand, like kind of, what is that? It feels good when somebody reads what you wrote. And the process is more fun when you have even a single guaranteed reader. It makes all the difference in the world, right? Right now, my writing buddy Sierra and I trade writing every time we hit even a minor milestone. Sometimes that's just showing each other what we wrote in a few hours. And that might be like one page, that might be 2 pages. And it might not sound like much to trade 2 pages of writing at the end of the day, but psychologically, it is huge. Having a writing buddy is great for the accountability factor, but I think there's also a really powerful enjoyment factor there because you write knowing that somebody is going to read your writing and it feels like the effort is worth more. It feels like there's going to be some kind of payoff at the end of all of it. That makes it satisfying, and I spend more time thinking about how people are going to react to my writing because I know there's going to be that payoff, right? It's really hard to overstate how huge that can be. The third tip for keeping the process fun is to find something childish about the writing process that you like. It's really easy to feel like, oh, I enjoy the writing process because it's big and important. But sometimes I think you can find pleasure in just like the smallest things or even things that sometimes maybe it feels a little bit guilty to take the pleasure in. I know a lot of people take a lot of pleasure in looking at the word count and just looking at that count go up, even if it's by a small number. I know people who give themselves gold stars for finishing pages, and I think that's great. Writing software like Noveler and Dabble really understand this. They have goals and they have streak tools. They let you have a little celebration for yourself, and that's important, right? When I was writing for my comprehensive exams during my PhD, I gave myself Hostess cupcakes for finishing milestones, and you can find other ways to just enjoy the process and reward yourself. Right? One thing that works for me is just writing screenplays, particularly with Final Draft. The first time I saw Final Draft in action, I thought it was a practically magical software. The way it auto-formatted writing into screenplay format, and it suggested character names and settings based on what I'd written already, and it remembered those things and prompted me, is this the location that you want based off of the first 3 letters? It just felt like I was only half writing the script, and I was working in some kind of like future history where I had AI augmentation for the writing process. I downloaded a trial the very same day that I found out about what Final Draft could do, and I just wanted to know if it felt as good as it looked on screen. And I'll be honest, I love writing in Final Draft, partially because its auto formatting features still feel like magic to me. There are times when I write screenplays and I'm just writing because I'm just watching it all happen, and it just feels good. Final Draft just does all of this formatting magic, and I marvel at how far we've come from when I started writing on WordStar. And the biggest thing that WordStar did that I just loved was, putting my writing and wrapping it around to the next line with no carriage return at all. I just kept on writing, barely ever hit the enter key. And maybe that's silly, And I'm sure all of you who are much younger than me just take all of this technology for granted. But personally, I just love starting up Final Draft and putting down some words and watching it auto suggest and auto format everything. And maybe I'll go into the beat board and I'll use some funky colors and I'll like try organizing some stuff and it just kind of feels like I'm going to go into the software and I'm just going to play around with something. It feels like the closest I'm ever going to get to being Tony Stark using AI to develop an Iron Man suit. And that's not bad, right? Those are just three quick things that might not make writing easy, but I hope take some of the edge off for you and distract you from the weight of feeling like you just don't want to write. If you've got a personal trick to keeping the writing process fun, write it up in the comments below. I'm always looking for a new way to enjoy the process. I hope you are enjoying your writing, and I hope you write a lot.